Enneagram, here we come.
Here we come, Enneagram.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Shrink Think podcast. Today we are going to follow up on a previous episode that we gave you as an intro to the Enneagram and how it can help your relationships. I just came back this week from a retreat that I did in North Carolina with some awesome therapists and practice owners. And I did a little presentation, like an intro to the Enneagram, and the feedback I got was that it was really helpful, informative, and it was interesting as I was going through this training, I was kind of going through the different triads of the Enneagram, which I'll explain here in a minute, and then going through each number. And as I was doing that, I was like describing each number and the personality types, the struggles and the fears, those kinds of things, or the motivations and the fears. And then I had forgotten that we have pretty much most of the numbers represented in the room, and so we would ask the people like, oh, does that resonate with you, for who you are? And they're like, oh my gosh, that was so right on. So it was really validating, I think. So I'd like to actually continue this on our podcast, so you guys can hear about it. And it's not going to replace, going into like reading the book The Road Back to You by Ian Crone. That's a fantastic book if you have not read it. It breaks them down really well, really concisely, in a really small, short book. But if you like listening to your information as opposed to reading, then stay tuned.
Here we are.
You came to the right place, my friend.
But you just noticed earlier, I just want to say, the casual flex that Aaron starts out with. Yeah, anyways, I was in North Carolina teaching a bunch of people about this. It was badass. Just... Good job!
Good job!
Killing it.
So let's start out. I think we'll break this down into at least like 3 episodes because there are 3 triads of the Enneagram. So what this means is the Enneagram is like it's a circle with 9 points around it, and they're all equidistant. And so if you break that down, you've got 3 numbers or 3 points that are in one triad, 3 numbers that are in a second triad, and then 3 numbers that are in the third triad. And these triads are essentially different personality subtypes, if you will, or they have like a certain kind of quality about them, a category to them that each number within that triad resonates with. That's pretty similar. So let me just explain it, and you'll probably have an idea of what I mean. So the first triad is at the top of the Enneagram. That is encapsulates the numbers 8, 9, and 1, and that's called the body triad or the gut triad. And that essentially means like these people experience things through the body, or their primary, experience in the world is like through their body. The second triad is the heart triad, and that includes the numbers 2, 3, and 4. And then the last triad is the head triad or the thinking triad, and that includes the numbers 5, 6, and 7. And these folks obviously then kind of go into their heads. They sort of operate in the world through their thinking. So that's kind of the brief overview. And I think we'll start out with the gut triad or the body triad and go around. And it's kind of interesting that you think of a 9-point. I just got to say this. Like, nobody ever says this, and I'm like, why doesn't anybody ever talk about it? It's a 9-point circle, and it starts with 8, and then goes to 9, and then 1. Like, why don't you start at 1? Go start at 1, and then go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Well, there's a reason.
That's so American.
It's so analytical. That's my organized brain. But there's a reason for it, because that triad is like at the top of the Enneagram, so you're going like clockwise from the top around. So in this body triad, it's really interesting because the 8s, the 9s, and the 1s, these are 3 different personality types. These people generally experience the world through their body, and what that means is they might not necessarily know what they're feeling at any given time. They're probably like least connected to their feelings than any other parts. Like, they can be aware of their thoughts more than they are of their emotions. And they're definitely aware of their body. Their body is the one that's like essentially the dashboard on the car that's giving them all the information about what's going on. So, for example, if something in life was happening and they were reacting to it or feeling something from it, and you ask them like, oh, how are you feeling? they might say, I don't know. Because they're not connected to their feelings as well, or they're not aware of their feelings. But if you were to ask them, how is your body doing? They will give you all kinds of information, like, oh, my back is hurting, or like, oh, I have this gut feeling, this gut tension, or like this pain in my shoulder or in my neck or whatever. It's like their body is telling them all the information about what's going on. You just have to kind of deduce from that something is going on. Sometimes it's like a physical sort of a thing, meaning like, I ran a lot and my legs are tired. But a lot of times it's not connected to something physical that you've done. It's related to your emotions and what you're going through.
Okay, so 8, 9, and 1. The 8 is a challenger. The 9 is the
Peacemaker.
Peacemaker, yeah. And then the 1 is a perfectionist.
Correct.
So from just a global place, what would you say is kind of common with each one of these types? Does that matter? And when you're moving into body types, do you know what I'm saying?
No, explain that a little more.
So peacemakers, they will, one of the qualities of those guys, number 9, is they kind of avoid any kind of conflict, and they just are kind of focused on peace, but they're aware of conflict, and meaning because they're avoiding it.
Yeah, they don't kind of avoid it. They definitely avoid conflict. They're like what? I'm gone. Don't finish that word.
Well, and then what I've grown to understand is they are aware of it, but meaning they don't really speak to it until they do. And when they do, it can be like ba-boom, shakalaka.
You know it.
Right.
Yeah. So
so 1 second. So they in my mind would be experiencing the anxiety of the avoidance of that conflict in their body, and they would be like reacting like, just keep it down, baby, keep it down.
Right. Nothing to see here.
Right. And so then I'm thinking, well, you got those guys doing that, and then you have the 1 that's just very aware of everything being out of place or not right.
Wrong, as they define it.
It's just wrong, the end. And they feel the tension of that wrongness also in their body.
Correct.
Okay. And then the 8s are kind of, they don't really do vulnerability well. They don't really want to talk in that. Go ahead.
It's like they're feeling the injustice of the world in their body.
The 8s or the 1s?
The 8s.
Okay.
Yeah, like the 1s are, because they're a perfectionist, or they're thinking about like what's right versus what's wrong. Like, these are all the things that are not right. It should be done this way because this is the right way to do it. The 8s are more focused on kind of like the fairness or the justice. They're usually huge advocates for the weak and the vulnerable, even though they themselves are not vulnerable. So they will experience the like injustice of the world, whether it's personal to them or it's more global. They will experience that in their bodies.
Okay, so they will feel like that rising passion type of a thing to like speak out against something or whatever. I was thinking as you were talking, describing the big picture triad, like there's got to be like when you break it down a little bit, kind of a tie together there for anyway.
Yes, exactly. And so more staying kind of global, the first episode was like, your 30,000 foot, and this might be more like a 10,000 foot, 5,000 foot view of them. And then maybe we'll do an episode where we're actually going into each number more specifically. But for today, in the gut triad, starting out, I've heard it said, and I think this is pretty true, I like this, it's easy to remember as well, that the main struggle for this triad is anger. There's just a lot of like contained or struggle with anger, whether it's repressed or it's allowed, or whether it's, I don't even know, if it's there, which is really common. But it's said that the 8s are angry outwardly toward other people. 1s, on the other side, are angry inwardly at themselves for not keeping up the standards that they know that they hold for the world. And then 9s in the middle don't even know they're angry until they're angry. It's like, it's fine. Like, what are you talking about?
Oh, I guess I'm angry.
Yes, that's true, exactly. And it's interesting. There's a guy on our staff here that is a 9, and we've talked about this before, and he has said like one of his like biggest personal realizations is like, I didn't even know I was angry, but now that I know, it's like, where is it coming from? It's like he's looking for it under the couch cushions all the time.
His anger coming from here.
Like, I'm going to sit down, but is there anger over here? I don't know. But that's
is there anger over here?
But that's kind of like a good thing, right? So that's the body triad. Any kind of closing thoughts before we move to the other triads?
No. I think we're good.
Okay, so anger is in the body triad. These people feel that. So keep those things in mind. There's like a primary struggle that's happening, right? In the second triad, we're talking about the numbers 2, 3, 4. This is the heart triad, which means that these people are feelers. They feel emotions pretty strongly or pretty intensely. And that doesn't mean that other numbers don't feel feelings as well, but this is like the primary thing that these numbers feel. And their main struggle is shame or like worthlessness. They want to be valued or have value through like the things that they do or just having some value as a person. And so there's like this big experience of emotions. Like 2s are helpers, 3s are either performers or achievers, and then 4s are it's like something like artists or
yeah.
It's
I know.
They tend to be
I don't know why we
creative
both forgot the
types.
name.
Yeah. Somebody will write us at the end. But so the feeling is like the dominant thing that they're experiencing in the world. If you ask these people, like, what's your body doing? They might not know because they're less connected to their bodies. You might ask them, what are you thinking? And some 2, 3s, 4s can tell you what their thoughts are. But a lot of times you'll hear, if you listen to their conversation, you'll hear their language saying, I feel this way, and this was happening, and I feel like such, and somebody else was feeling this, and it's like all feeling oriented. They're very emotion centered, if you will.
Mm-hmm. I think they might be dreamers, the 4s.
That might be right. That sounds familiar.
Yeah. So in light of that, I'm thinking like the working with people that are 2s and 3s with this shame thing. That is a big deal. Like it just resonates. I'm like, yes, that is totally the way that 2s. I'm a 2. Kind of experience that because you're constantly
2/6 maybe.
Yeah, definitely not a 6. I actually don't even come up 6.
Okay.
I'm actually a 2/3 apparently. That's probably because of the business thing.
And Whitney was telling me on this retreat, like she thinks I'm a 3/4. So.
Oh, I can see that. You're missing out on something that everybody knows.
Yeah,
you got to keep networking.
That's right.
Anyway, yeah. So at any rate, I'm trying to think of with 4s. I think in particular, they have more of a struggle. They're kind of always the deep people. They're really deep thinkers. They want to know more, and it's like I think of an old SNL skit where like they're all sitting around and talking, and we actually just did this podcast a couple ago that were about like how to be in a relationship, and we use the idea of different layers or whatever. So if you can imagine these 3 or 4 people in SNL are talking, and every time they get to this one person, they go, yeah. So what I was realizing when you were just saying that, and everybody just stops and looks at the person like, you just needed to say you like apples. Like, we didn't need to talk about the depth of it. And so 4s, I feel like, a lot of times they kind of feel their feelings really big and they are, it's like always there. Like they always kind of need to connect to it and talk about it. They can't like not talk about it.
Right. Yeah. And so in the middle of that, right, you have as you're going around the Enneagram, in this triad, you have like on one corner of the triangle of that triad, you've got a 2. On the other corner, you've got the 4. And in the right down the middle, cutting that triad in half is the number 3. And I didn't know this, but Whitney told me it's like it's the primary thing that 3s feel is their feelings, but it's also the thing that they're most like disconnected from. Like they don't know what they're feeling, or they can have like deception with themselves about what they're feeling. But that shame component is huge, and each one is sort of wanting to feel special or feel valued. The 3 a lot in performance or achievement or accomplishment. The 2 is through helping.
Yeah, and I think there's an avoidance piece in there, right? Because the avoidance meaning like as you start to feel, speaking as a 2/3, as you start to feel, and you can like feel the pathway toward shame, And I think that's the cutoff. Like, and nope, not gonna feel
like
that.
it's drawing you.
And we're done.
Go.
Like a tractor beam.
Right.
Like, oh, there's a good pathway. We're not doing that. What were we talking about? Anything else?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that connective tissue per se.
Yeah, and so it's helpful. So if you're, I'll do this again at the end, but just be keeping in mind as we're talking about this that the certain people within these triads on the Enneagram experience life differently, and if you want to have good relationships, it can be really helpful to engage them in the way that they are. Like if I'm a feeler and I'm talking with a 9, who's not as much of a feeler, or they're more of a body type, then I'm, instead of asking them like, how are you feeling? Some 9s might not even know. Some might, for example. But I can say like, how is your body doing? Or if there's some sort of
I'm just thinking of how that could go across.
Well, true. But I mean, these are like, I'm thinking about like your friendships where you've kind of established how you can communicate with each other. And so this would be like, if something's been going on, if they've had a stressful week, I might ask like, how's your body? Like, are you feeling it in your body? Or sometimes for a lot of those numbers, it's like maybe you need to move your body in order to get some clarity or get some of that stress out. Because when they move, then they can feel better. Or for feeling types, it's like you need to like listen to music, you need to feel, or for 3s, like you need to do something in order to feel like I can get it out of me. Or 4s just need to like
journal,
exactly pull up the Kleenex box and just
journal it out.
Journal it out. So moving on, the last triad is the thinking triad or the head triad, and these are your 5, 6, 7 numbers. Your 5 is the challenger.
The 8.
It's the investigator. The 6 is the loyalist, and the 7. I always want to say the playboy because I think that's like the not so great way of saying like the fun novel.
Yeah,
I've got it.
I know.
Yeah, we'll look it up. So in this triad, the thinking triad, the predominant way that they're engaging the world is through their head, their thoughts. So they can, like the 5s, know a lot of things. They'll gather a ton of knowledge about the world. The 6s will kind of go either toward or away from. Oh, the enthusiast is the 7. Thank you. Yeah, the enthusiast. So the 6s will go toward. This is like a counterphobic type, which don't worry about that term, but it's like some 6s will go toward their fear, and a lot of 6s will move away from their fear, like just really hugely avoid. But they will think about things and strategize by like being in their heads. And the 7s then, even though they can like engage a lot of fun and do a lot of novel things, they're like living in their heads. They have Peter Pan syndrome, is what's been said. So these types are not necessarily connected to their feelings as well, because feelings can be really fun, but also feelings can be really bad. You can have bad feelings, and we don't want bad. That's too uncomfortable. So let's stay in our heads to be disconnected from that, and then it feels safer in the world.
Well, disconnected from their body also. So they just kind of are operating. If you think about it, it's like that's what's going on. They're thinking. They're 6s are mapping out the entire future. 5s continually encounter a new thought, or a new, maybe a better way to say it is a new question, and so they can't get out of their heads because there's always one more question to answer. These are the guys that like literally they're the researchers, right? And 7s are in their head, but they really don't want to be bored, right? So they need something to do. So it's like they almost don't want to be in their head.
It's like they're in their head is more like an imagination world. Mm-hmm. It's thoughts, and it's not just feelings, but it's like, oh, if I do this, and this would be fun, and this would be a great experience. It's like mapping out, strategizing, not as much of like the worst case scenario like a 6 might do, but it's more like this would be fun, this would be new, this would be interesting.
Well, and I know there's the fun zone. I'm thinking of a couple 7s that are business owners that I know, and they get really excited about putting the businesses together. Now, on the one hand, it's fun, but on the other hand, they think about, excuse me, they think about like it is. They'll put up with a lot of stress, I guess, is my point, to get their business thing going. So it's not all about fun. They just get excited about essentially not the busyness, but the interaction of everything coming together, they're very enthusiastic about it, and they're very good at communicating the passion of that type of thing, selling it essentially to other people.
Right. So in this triad, if you're going to encounter people in this triad, you're more likely to get a bunch of thoughts. And it's really interesting. I pay attention to people's language. I might ask them like, oh, how do you feel about this? And they'll say, I think such and such, and oh, I think this other thing. And it's like they will often give you a lot of thoughts about things, or a lot of opinions, or they'll tell you facts. Well, this is this thing, and that's the other thing, and the way that this works is this thing. And it's like, you're pretty disconnected from it, right? You're looking at the world kind of from a detached or an objective standpoint, which can be really helpful. But also, if I'm trying to engage you, you're not necessarily like involved in that, so it might feel somewhat disconnected.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other thing too is that with this group, it can be hard for them. It's almost pointless to try to talk about feelings. Like on the 7 will be like, this is a waste of time. The 5's going to be like, that doesn't answer my question. The 6 is going to be like, that's just overwhelming. That's more crap to think about, to be afraid of for the future. So let's just cut that.
Right, because remember, fear is like the predominant struggle of that group. So just to kind of recap, in the body triad, 8, 9s, 1s, their predominant struggle is anger in their body. And in the heart triad, 2, 3, 4, predominant struggle is shame. And which is like, your nerve, the thing that they want to avoid, or their biggest struggle here, really. And then in the head triad, 5, 6, 7, their struggle is fear. So in each one of these numbers, they bring a lot of incredible strengths to the table. And also, we each have our own individual struggles that look a certain way. Now, I just need to say really briefly as we close this up that these are not boxes that we're putting people into. These are like general categories that people tend to fall into, and each person is like a unique flavor of that. So just because we say these are kind of generally how people are, doesn't mean that we are making these fixed, right? Because each person can look very different within that. And let me also say that we are not your therapist.
That's what I was going to say. And also, we are not your therapist, even though we are therapists. So take this for what you will, impart it into your brain, love it tenderly, and have a great day. Sure, got to get this thing broken down.
Right, man.
Oh my God.